Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the absolute cheek of Badenoch throwing a petulant strop at Starmer for giving her a lesson in basic maths on defence budget when her own party in government took defence spending to basically the lowest on record and at no point ever raised it to where it was at the end of the last Labour government. But after her performances in PMQs so far, what did we really expect? But first, for daily political commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So, it's not like all Tories are behaving like Badenoch. I know backbenchers have more licence to be a bit more sensible than the leaders of a party who have to maintain a broad appeal. But at PMQs today, one Conservative MP, Simon Hoare, attacked Trump as childish for talk of forcing Canada to become the 51st state. Starmer thanked the MP for raising the issue and reaffirmed our alliance with Canada. Now, you wouldn't expect Badenoch to ask questions which are going to draw agreement from the Prime Minister on a regular basis. Opposition can be constructive, but still needs to criticise. But not for the first time, so bereft was she of critical questions to ask. All she could do was pick at, today, the maths of the proposed defence boost. The boost yesterday, which begins in 2027, is being variously described as a £6 billion a year boost and a £13 billion a year boost. How can it be both, she asked. Now, in theory, you would say, well, that's a reasonable question, isn't it? So Starmer explained it to her. The reason, by the way, is that the defence budget for 2027 will be £13 billion more than it is now. However, as Labour had already uplifted defence spending in the budget announced last October, in terms of how much extra it will be on top of the extra that Rachel Reeves had already announced for 2027, it will be £6 billion. So as with anything in maths, how much of an increase it is depends on your base. It's £13 billion a year more than the Tories budgeted for 2027, but £6 billion more than Labour did. And frankly, Starmer should have put it in those terms. But this was too complicated for Kemi Badenoch, the supposed engineer for whom this level of maths should be as simple for her as it is for me with my physics background. So she asked again. Starmer wearily explained it again and pointed out again that there were two starting points you might use to explain the figure. Then Starmer seemed to remember that Badenoch has struggled to come up with 6 real questions a week of late, and so tried to helpfully point out that if she asked again, he would have to give the same answer again. Badenoch seemed to take exception to this, describing the PM as patronising for not answering the question, even though he did, twice. And he really did. Like, it is true that ministers, especially prime ministers, do not always answer questions properly or even at all. And so there can be good reasons for a leader of the opposition to repeat a question in order to emphasise that the Prime Minister is not actually answering it. But not only had Starmer answered it, but he had answered it in a way that just any ordinary person watching would understand perfectly well. I mean, he's a lawyer. I can't imagine maths is his strong point. In fact, Badenoch will understand maths much better than Starmer. She was feigning ignorance here in the hope that anyone watching wouldn't understand the answer. But by thinking that, she is effectively patronising the public. Because, yes, most people are really bad at maths, but even they can get that an increase in spending can have 2 different values if you measure it from 2 different starting points. It's simple subtraction of 2-digit numbers. But also, the absolute cheek of any Tory, whether it was Badenoch or later on Jeremy Hunt, although he did it in a more polite way later, demanding that Labour go much further and faster on boosting defence. Should we look at their record on this? This is UK defence spending as a share of GDP since 1980. Now, we can see it falls sharply from 1985. That's fine, by the way. It was at the arse end of the Cold War when relationships were improving. Bit of a spike in 1991. That's the first Gulf War, the one that actually made sense. Then it carried on falling after the end of the Cold War, probably too much out of complacency. But again, you don't need Cold War level defence funding, do you, when you're not having a Cold War on? Problem is, we may now have a hot war on. But anyway, as I've said recently several times, if defence is working well, the public never even know it's there. Well, what sort of government is going to spend loads of extra money on something that doesn't seem to be needed when you could use the money to build something that people will notice and appreciate? But after hitting a floor of 2.2%, Labour then did start to increase it. Now, this is where we should take note. So after being in power for 7 years, the last Labour government had completed most of its urgent repairs left over from the Tory years, so we're able to start boosting spending in other areas. This is what, if Trump would, very kindly mind not causing a global economic collapse, could happen again. Labour at the moment are prioritising spending on certain things: the NHS, housing, energy, education, transport via devolution. They've now had to throw defence into the mix early because of Trump's behaviour. But once these tasks are largely completed, the government will be able to go back to neglected lower priority areas and boost those, as they had intended to do for defence, just as the last Labour government did. But anyway, Labour then boosted defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, which was considered adequate for NATO contributions and even to help the monkey men in the White House illegally invade the odd desert now and then. The Tories then took it down to as low as 2% before raising it back to 2.3%. The point is, it was never as high as 2.5% under the Tories after their first budget. Now, it's fine for them to support the idea of raising defence spending, of course, but the absolute nerve of them actually criticising Labour for not doing it quicker when their own budget was for less money for defence even before this boost announcement, right? Now, Starmer can't really do this, but I would like someone to ask Badenoch, what's changed? Why was it fine for her party not to raise defence spending when they had the power to do so, even after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine? Because no, spending didn't even go up after 2022. So why was defence spending of 2.3% of GDP absolutely fine for 2024, but not 2025? What changed? Someone should ask her that, because the only answer that I can think of is that Trump has destabilised Europe and strengthened Russia, which is why Starmer would be foolish to ask the question himself for fear of being asked the same back. But that is the reason. And although Starmer has called Trump out on several things, like his insane plans for ethnic cleansing and theft of Gaza, which he's produced a mad video of now, denials about Russia starting the war, calling Zelensky a dictator, and today tacitly agreeing that Trump was out of order, talking about annexing Canada, Badenoch has so far avoided criticising Trump for anything apart from the personal attack on Zelensky. Even she had to criticise that. And although, sure, she needs to be diplomatic as well, she has more leeway than the Prime Minister to tell it like it is, and yet uses that leeway even less. Someone should ask her why 2.3% was fine a few months ago, but not now. I want her to have to answer that question, because the only thing that's changed is that the USA used to oppose Russia's invasions of other countries and now doesn't. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.